Hello again. Welcome to part 7 of The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. A flash of pain woke him, sharp as ice, the colour of slow thunder, down in the weeds that summer's night. The ground beneath him seemed relatively soft and oddly warm. He pushed a hand down and felt something like warm fur beneath him. He had landed on the grass pile where the graveyard's gardener threw the cuttings from the mower, and it had broken his fall. Still, there was a pain in his chest, and his leg hurt as if he'd landed on it first and twisted it. Bod moaned. "Hush, you a hush-husher boy," said a voice from behind him. "Where did you come from? Dropping like thunderstone? What way's that to carry on?" "I was in the apple tree," said Bod. "Ah, let me see your leg." "Broken like the tree's limb, I'll be bound." Cool fingers prodded his left leg. "Not broken. Twisted, yes. Sprained, perhaps. You have the devil's own luck, boy, falling into the compost. 'Tain't the end of the world." "Oh, good," said Bod. "Hurts, though." He turned his head, looked up and behind him. She was older than him, but not a grown-up, and she looked neither friendly nor unfriendly. Wary, mostly. She had a face that was intelligent and not even a little bit beautiful. "I'm Bod," he said. "The live boy?" she asked. Bod nodded. "I thought you must be," she said. "We've heard of you, even over here in the potter's field. What do they call you?" "Owens," he said. "Nobody Owens. Bod for short." "How do you do, young Master Bod?" Bod looked her up and down. She wore a plain white shift. Her hair was mousy and long, and there was something of the goblin in her face. A sideways hint of a smile that seemed to linger, no matter what the rest of her face was doing. "Were you a suicide?" he asked. "Did you steal a shilling?" "Never stole nothink," she said. "Not even a handkerchief. Anyway," she said pertly, "the suicides is all over there on the other side of that hawthorn, and the gallows birds are in the blackberry patch, both of them. One was a coiner, t'other a highwayman, or so he says, although if you ask me, I doubt he was more than a common footpad and night walker." "Ah," said Bod. Then, suspicious forming, tentatively, he said, "They say a witch is buried here." She nodded. "Drowned and burned and buried here without as much as a stone to mark the spot." "You were drowned and burned?" She settled down on the hill of grass cuttings beside him and held his throbbing leg with her chilly hands. "They come to my little cottage at dawn, for I'm a proper awake, and drags me out onto the green. 'You're a witch,' they shouts, fat and fresh scrubbed all pink in the morning, like so many pig wiggins scrubbed clean for market day. One by one they gets up beneath the sky and tells of milk gone sour and horses gone lame, and finally Mistress Jemima gets up, the fattest, pinkest, best scrubbed of them all, and tells how as Solomon Porrit now cuts her dead and instead hangs around the washhouse like a wasp about a honeypot. And it's all my magic,' she says, 'that made him so, and the poor young man must be bespelled.' So they strap me to the cooking stool and forces it under the water of the duck pond, saying if I'm a witch I'll neither drown nor care, but if I'm not a witch I'll feel it. And Mistress Jemima's father gives them each a silver groat to hold the stool down under the foul green water for a long time to see if I'd choke on it." "And did you?" "Oh yes, got a lungful of water. It done for me." "Oh," said Bod. "Then you weren't a witch after all." The girl fixed him with her beady ghost eyes and smiled a lopsided smile. She still looked like a goblin, but now she looked like a pretty goblin. Bod didn't think she would have needed magic to attract Solomon Porrit, not with a smile like that. "What nonsense! Of course I was a witch. They learned that when they untied me from the cooking stool and stretched me on the green, 9 parts dead and all covered with duckweed and stinking pond muck. I rolled my eyes back in my head and I cursed each and every one of them there on the village green that morning, that none of them would ever rest easily in a grave. I was surprised at how easily it came, the cursing. Like dancing it was, when your feet pick up the steps of a new measure your ears have never heard and your head don't know, and they dance till dawn. She stood and twirled and kicked, and her bare feet flashed in the moonlight. That was how I cursed them, with my last gurgling pond-watery breath. And then I expired. They burned my body on the green until I was nothing but blackened charcoal, and then they popped me in a hole in the potter's field without so much as a headstone to mark my name, and it was only then that she paused and seemed for a moment wistful. "Are any of them buried in the graveyard then?" asked Bod. "Not a one," said the girl with a twinkle. "The Saturday after they drowned and toasted me, a carpet was delivered to Master Porringer all the way from London town, and it was a fine carpet. But it turned out there was more in that carpet than strong wool and good weaving, for it carried the plague in its pattern. And by Monday 5 of them were coughing blood, and their skins were gone as black as mine when they hauled me from the fire. A week later and it had taken most of the village, and they threw the bodies all promiscuous in a plague pit they dug outside of the town that they filled in after." "Was everyone in the village killed?" She shrugged. "Everyone who watched me get drowned and burned." "How's your leg now?" "Better," he said. "Thanks." Bod stood up slowly and limped down from the grass pile. He leaned against the iron railings. "So, were you always a witch?" he asked. "I mean, before you cursed them all?" "As if it would take witchcraft," she said with a sniff, "to get Solomon Porritt mooning around my cottage." Which, Bod thought, but did not say, was not actually an answer to the question. Not at all. "What's your name?" he asked. "Got no headstone," she said, turning down the corners of her mouth. "Might be anybody, mightn't I?" "But you must have a name." "Liza Hempstock, if you please," she said tartly. Then she said, "It's not that much to ask, is it? Something to mark my grave. I'm just down there, see, with nothing but nettles to show where I rest." And she looked so sad just for a moment that Bod wanted to hug her. And then it came to him as he squeezed between the railings of the fence. He would find Liza Hempstock a headstone with her name upon it. He would make her smile. He turned to wave goodbye as he began to clamber up the hill, but she was already gone. There were broken lumps of other people's stones and statues in the graveyard, but Bod knew that would have been entirely the wrong sort of thing to bring to the grey-eyed witch in the potter's field. It was going to take more than that. He decided not to tell anyone what he was planning, on the not entirely unreasonable basis that they would have told him not to do it. Over the next few days his mind filled with plans, each more complicated and extravagant than the last. Mr. Pennyworth despaired. "I do believe," he announced, scratching his dusty moustache, "that you are getting, if anything, worse. You are not fading. You are obvious, boy. You are difficult to miss. If you came to me in company with a purple lion, a green elephant and a scarlet unicorn astride, which was the King of England in his royal robes, I do believe that it is you and you alone that people would stare at, dismissing the others as minor irrelevances." Bod simply stared at him and said nothing. He was wondering whether there were special shops in the places where the living people gathered that sold only headstones, and if so, how could he go about finding one? And fading was the least of his problems. He took advantage of Miss Borrow's willingness to be diverted from the subjects of grammar and composition to the subject of anything else at all, to ask her about money. How exactly it worked, how one got used to it to get things one wanted. Bod had a number of coins he'd found over the years. He had learned that the best place to find money was to go afterwards to wherever courting couples had used the grass of the graveyard as a place to cuddle and snuggle and kiss and roll about. He would often find metal coins on the ground in the place where they'd been, and he thought perhaps he could finally get some use from them. "How much would a headstone be?" he asked Miss Burrows. "In my time," she told him, "they were 15 guineas. I do not know what they would be today. More, I would imagine. Much, much more." Bod had £2.53. It would, he was quite certain, not be enough. It had been 4 years, almost half a lifetime, since Bod had visited the Indigo Man's tomb, but he still remembered the way. He climbed to the top of the hill until he was above the whole town, above even the top of the apple tree, above even the steeple of the ruined chapel, up where the Frobisher mausoleum stood like a rotten tooth. He slipped down into it, behind the coffin, and down and still further down to the tiny stone steps cut into the centre of the hill, and those he descended until he reached the stone chamber. It was dark in that tomb, dark as a tin mine, but Bod saw the Dead Sea and gave room up to its secrets to him. The sleer was coiled around the wall of the barrow. He could feel it. It was as he remembered it, an invisible thing, all smoky tendrils and hate and greed. This time, however, he was not afraid of it. "Fear us," whispered the sleer, "for we guard things precious and never lost." "I don't fear you," said Bod, "remember, and I need to take something away from here." "Nothing ever leaves," came the reply from the coiled thing in the darkness. "The knife, the brooch, the goblet, the sleer guards them in the darkness. We wait." "Pardon me for asking," said Bod, "but was this your grave?" "Master sets us here on the plain to guard, buries our skulls beneath this stone, leaves us here knowing what we have to do. We guard the treasures until Master comes back." "I expect he's forgotten all about you," pointed out Bod. "I'm sure he's been dead himself for ages." "We are the sleer. We guard." Bod wondered just how long ago you had to go back before the deepest tomb inside the hill was on a plain, and he knew it must have been an extremely long time ago. He could feel the sleer winding its waves of fear around him like the tendrils of some carnivorous plant. He was beginning to feel cold and slow, as if he had been bitten in the heart by some Arctic viper, and it was starting to pump its icy venom through his body. He took a step forward, so he was standing against the stone slab, and he reached down and closed his fingers around the coldness of the brooch. "Hish!" whispered the sleer. "We guard that for the master." "He won't mind," said Bod. He took a step backwards, walking towards the stone steps, avoiding the desiccated remains of people and animals on the floor. The sleer writhed angrily, twining around the tiny chamber like ghost smoke. Then it slowed. "It comes back," said the sleer in its tangled triple voice. "Always comes back." Bod went up the stone steps inside the hill as fast as he could. At one point he imagined that there was something coming after him, but when he broke out of the top into the Frobisher mausoleum and he could breathe the cool dawn air, nothing moved or followed. Bod sat in the open air on the top of the hill and held the brooch. He thought it was all black at first, but then the sun rose and he could see that the stone in the centre of the black metal was a swirling red. It was the size of a robin's egg, and Bod stared into the stone, wondering if there were things moving in its heart. His eyes and soul deep in the crimson world. If Bod had been smaller, he would have wanted to put it in his mouth. The stone was held in place by a black metal clasp, by something that looked like claws, with something else crawling around it. The something else looked almost snake-like, but it had too many heads. Bod wondered if that was what the sleigh looked like in the daylight. He wandered down the hill, taking all the shortcuts he knew, through the ivy tangle that covered the Bartleby family vault, and inside the sound of the Bartlebys grumbling and readying for sleep, and on and over and through the railings and into the potter's field. He called, "Liza, Liza," and looked around. "Good morrow, young lummocks," said Liza's voice. Bod could not see her, but there was an extra shadow beneath the hawthorn tree, and as he approached it, the shadow resolved itself into something pearlescent and translucent in the early morning light. Something girl-like, something grey-eyed. "I should be decently sleeping," she said. "What kind of carrying on is this?" "Your headstone," he said. "I wanted to know what you want on it." "My name," she said. "It must have my name on it, with a big E for Elizabeth, like the old queen that died when I was born, and a big H for Hempstock. More than that I care not, for I never did master my letters." "What about dates?" asked Bod. "William the Conqueror 1066, she sang in the whispers of the dawn wind in the hawthorn bush. "A big E, if you please, and a big H." "Did you have a job?" asked Bod. "I mean, when you weren't being a witch?" "I done laundry," said the dead girl, and then the morning sunlight flooded the wasteland, and Bod was alone. And that's it for today, folks. So tune in tomorrow to find out what happens in part 8 of The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Sleep well.